I woke up to the sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and a live jazz band playing an upbeat tune. That was strange because, as far as I knew, I hadn't invited 100 well-dressed strangers into my backyard. I blinked a few times, sat up in bed, and stared out the window. There were tables, twinkling lights, and a massive banner that read, HOA Charity Gala hosted by Karen. My backyard. My house. My land. And yet, here was Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, standing at the center of it all like she owned the place. A man in a tuxedo was bidding on a luxury barbecue grill that looked suspiciously like mine. For a solid 30 seconds I just stared in disbelief. I had dealt with Karen's nonsense before, petty fines for non-existent violations, emails about approved lawn colors, and once, a furious lecture about how my garbage cans weren't facing the right way. But this was a new level of insanity. I threw on a shirt and stormed downstairs, barely processing the sight of caterers strolling through my kitchen like they were supposed to be there. A waiter tried handing me a glass of champagne. I ignored him, pushed open the patio doors, and stepped into the madness. Karen spotted me immediately. "Ah, there he is," she announced, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Jake, I was just telling everyone how generous you were to let us use your space for this wonderful cause." I stared at her. "I didn't." She waved a manicured hand in the air, cutting me off. "It's for the children, dear. The less fortunate. We're raising money for the Sunshine Fund." I narrowed my eyes. "The what now?" Karen sighed dramatically, as if I were some uneducated peasant who had just asked what taxes were. "The Sunshine Fund. A charity very close to my heart." "Never heard of it." She laughed, but there was a sharpness in her eyes. "Well, that's because you're not very involved in community affairs. We, the HOA, decided this would be the perfect location. And as an HOA member, you're expected to contribute." I scanned the crowd. Everyone seemed to be having the time of their lives, eating expensive hors d'oeuvres, clinking their glasses, chatting like they weren't standing on my property without my permission. Karen was still talking, going on about how some people lacked community spirit. I took a deep breath. "Karen, you are literally holding a fundraiser in my backyard without asking me." She let out a loud laugh, the kind that was meant to make me seem ridiculous. "Oh, Jake, don't be dramatic. It's not like you were using it." Before I could respond, a man in a white tuxedo called out, "Karen, when are we getting those tax receipts?" Karen's smile flickered, just for a second. I noticed. That was when my IRS-trained instincts kicked in. Tax receipts? For what? I had seen a lot in my years working for the Internal Revenue Service: fraudulent deductions, hidden accounts, fake charities. And something about the way Karen stiffened made the little alarm bells in my head start ringing. "Oh, of course, Harold," she cooed. "Those will be mailed out after the event. Just focus on giving from the heart." I crossed my arms. "You said this was for the Sunshine Fund. Where exactly is this fund registered?" Karen's smile tightened. "Jake, I don't appreciate your tone. This is a night of generosity." I didn't move. "Where is the money going?" She glanced at the guests. People were watching now, forks hovering over expensive appetizers, interest peaked. Her eyes darted toward her husband, Todd, who was conveniently busy pretending to read something on his phone. "Honestly, Jake," she huffed, "if you wanted to contribute, you could have just donated instead of making a scene." I tilted my head. "Oh, I'll contribute. Just not in the way you think." Something in my voice must have unsettled her because she cleared her throat and turned to the crowd. "Enough distractions, everyone. The live auction is starting." I wasn't done. I stepped closer and lowered my voice. "Karen, I know a thing or two about nonprofit tax laws. And if this isn't a registered charity, you're looking at felony fraud." She scoffed. "Oh, please. You're just trying to ruin the evening." I smiled. "And you're trying to run a scam in broad daylight. But here's the fun part. You picked the worst possible backyard to do it in." Her mouth opened, then closed. She didn't know. I pulled out my wallet, flipped it open, and showed her my IRS badge. Karen's face drained of color. I leaned in just enough that only she could hear me. You just held a fake charity event in the backyard of a federal agent. She swallowed. Jake, let's not be rash. I gestured around us. Karen, you've got thousands of dollars sitting in that donation box, no receipts, and you just auctioned off a grill that wasn't even yours. Behind her, the man in the white tuxedo pointed at the grill. Wait a minute, that's his? Karen turned red. This is ridiculous. We're all neighbors here, Jake. Surely, we can work something out. I smiled. Oh, we will. Just wait until I pull up your financials. Her eyes darted around, looking for an escape. The problem was, there wasn't one. I had her cornered, and she knew it. The jazz band played on. The guests whispered. And Karen? Karen had just realized her little kingdom was about to collapse, right in front of her adoring subjects. Karen's smile was gone. The confident, smug queen of the HOA had been replaced by someone desperately trying to regain control of a situation slipping through her fingers. I watched as she glanced at Todd, who was still glued to his phone, pretending to be unaware of the growing tension. The guests had picked up on it, though. The room, once filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses, had grown quieter, the energy shifting from festive to something more uncertain. I wasn't going to shut this down just yet. I had to be smart. Calling the cops immediately would be satisfying, sure, but it wouldn't be enough. If Karen was running a scam, I needed proof. Real, undeniable, legal proof. I had been in the IRS long enough to know that people like her thrived on loopholes, half-truths, and technicalities. She would spin this as a misunderstanding if I didn't corner her properly. Karen recovered quickly, forcing a tight smile back onto her face. Jake, dear, let's not dampen the evening with such negativity. Everyone is here to support a good cause, after all. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I scanned the room, looking for anyone who might be useful. My eyes landed on Harold, the man in the white tuxedo who had asked about tax receipts earlier. He looked like someone who had enough money to care about where it went. I turned to him. Harold, you donated tonight, right? Harold nodded, setting down his drink. Of course. I pledged 10 grand. I raised an eyebrow. And you were promised a tax-deductible receipt? He hesitated, then nodded again. Yes. Karen assured me this was a registered 501c3 organization. I smiled. That's interesting because I just checked, and there's no Sunshine Fund registered as a nonprofit in this state. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Karen's face twitched, but she still held her ground. Jake, I really don't appreciate these accusations. I shrugged. It's not an accusation if it's a fact. Harold frowned. Wait, hold on. If this isn't a real nonprofit, then where exactly is the money going? Karen let out a forced laugh. Oh, Harold, don't be ridiculous. Of course, it's real. The paperwork just hasn't gone through yet. I tilted my head. That's not how nonprofit status works, Karen. You can't solicit tax-deductible donations without being registered. That's fraud. Todd finally looked up from his phone, his face pale. Karen, maybe we should. Karen shot him a glare so sharp it could have cut glass. We are not entertaining this nonsense. That was all the confirmation I needed. Karen wasn't scrambling for a good explanation because she was telling the truth. She was scrambling because she had been caught. I pulled out my phone and tapped into the IRS database. If she had filed anything remotely legitimate, I'd be able to find it. A few swipes, a quick search, and nothing. No records, no pending filings, nothing that tied her or the HOA to a legal charity. I turned my screen toward Harold. See for yourself. Harold squinted at the phone. His face darkened. Karen, explain this. Karen let out another nervous laugh, but her voice cracked this time. Oh, for heaven's sake, Harold, don't be so dramatic. The paperwork must be delayed. Government bureaucracy, you know how it is. I raised an eyebrow. Karen, I work for the IRS. I know exactly how it is. Her hands clenched at her sides, her jaw tightening. The guests were no longer murmuring. They were outright whispering, their faces shifting from admiration to suspicion. I turned back to Harold. I'd suggest requesting your money back before this turns into a bigger problem. Harold took a slow, deliberate breath, then reached for his phone. I think I'll do that right now. Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red. Harold, we talked about this. Think about the community. Harold didn't even look at her as he tapped on his banking app. I'm thinking about my 10 grand. That was when things really started to unravel. Other guests, sensing the shift, began questioning where their donations had gone. A woman near the front crossed her arms. Karen, I gave you $2,000 in cash. Where's the receipt for that? A man beside her nodded. Yeah, I gave 5 grand. You said it was tax deductible. Another woman, dressed in an expensive black dress, frowned. Wait, I gave cash too. You said it was going to the local orphanage. I watched as Karen's composure shattered in real time. She tried laughing, but it sounded forced and unnatural. Oh, everyone, please, let's not turn this into an interrogation. We're all friends here. Harold shook his head. I want my money back. Karen's eyes flicked toward the donation box sitting on the table beside her. A heavy wooden box filled with envelopes of cash and check. She subtly stepped closer to it, as if she were planning her next move. I wasn't about to let her make one. I took a step forward, dropping my voice just enough that only she could hear me. You thinking about running, Karen? She swallowed hard. I don't know what you're talking about. I smiled. You're cornered. If you touch that money, that's theft. If you run, that's an admission of guilt. If you stay, I expose everything. She let out a shaky breath. Jake, you don't understand. I cut her off. No, I understand perfectly. You used the HOA to run an illegal fundraising scam. You took money from your neighbors under false pretenses. And you did it all in my backyard. She swallowed hard. Maybe we can work something out. I let that sit for a moment, then turned toward the guests. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time we involve the authorities. A ripple of agreement spread through the crowd. Someone was already pulling out their phone. Karen looked around frantically, realizing too late that her kingdom had crumbled beneath her feet. Todd grabbed her arm. Karen, we need to go. She yanked free. No. This is just a misunderstanding. I shook my head. No, Karen. This is fraud. Her eyes darted toward the street, calculating an escape route. But she didn't make it more than 3 steps before Harold grabbed her wrist. Where do you think you're going? Karen jerked away, but it was over. The illusion had shattered. Her supporters had turned into her accusers. The HOA board members were whispering among themselves, already trying to distance themselves from her mess. The night wasn't just ruined. It was over. And Karen was finally realizing that she had just made the worst mistake of her life. Karen's breathing had turned shallow. The confidence, the smug superiority, the carefully curated illusion of control, it was all gone. Her eyes darted around as if looking for an escape, but there was none. The walls were closing in. The guests who once sang her praises were now turning against her. Some had already pulled out their phones, whispering about calling the police. Others just watched in stunned silence, waiting to see how it all played out. Todd grabbed her arm again, harder this time. Karen, we need to go. Now. She ripped free from his grip and turned toward the donation box. For a brief second, I thought she might actually make a run for it. That would have been the worst possible move, but desperation had a way of making people stupid. Her fingers twitched as if itching to snatch the cash before it all crumbled. I took a single step forward, locking eyes with her. Touch that money, and I swear your charges will double. Her hand froze midair. The weight of reality was settling in now. Karen's empire wasn't just falling, it had already collapsed. She turned back to the guests, trying to salvage what little she had left. Everyone, please, this is all a misunderstanding. I would never steal from the community. I love this neighborhood. Her voice cracked, but she pushed forward, reaching for any excuse that might save her. It's just a little mix-up with the paperwork. It happens all the time. Right, Jake? You work for the IRS. You know how slow these things can be. I shook my head. This isn't a paperwork issue, Karen. You knowingly accepted donations for a fake charity. You can try to spin it however you want, but that's fraud. She turned to Todd, hoping for backup, but his face was pale, sweaty. The man had finally realized just how deep in trouble they were. He lifted his hands in surrender. Look, I had nothing to do with this. Karen's eyes widened. What? Todd shook his head quickly, eyes darting to the neighbors, then back at me. I handle the HOA accounts. I don't touch the charity money. That's all, Karen. A few gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's mouth fell open, pure betrayal flickering across her face. Todd, what are you doing? I'm not going down for this, he muttered, stepping away from her. You're the one who planned everything. You said it was foolproof. She took a step toward him, voice lowering into something desperate and venomous. You idiot. If I go down, you go down. Todd turned to me. I'll cooperate. I'll tell them everything. Karen let out a strangled sound, something between a laugh and a sob. Oh, you spineless coward. Todd ignored her and looked around. Somebody call the cops. That was the final blow. Karen stumbled back as if she had been physically struck. The people she had controlled for years, the ones she had bullied, manipulated, intimidated into submission, they were done with her. The crowd, once polite and eager to impress her, had shifted completely. No one was on her side now. One of the board members, Debbie, stepped forward, arms crossed. Karen, we trusted you. You told us this money was going to charity. Karen forced a shaky smile. It is. Debbie scoffed. Then show us the records. Where's the financial breakdown? Where's the proof that a single penny of this ever went to anyone other than you? Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. The air around us thickened as sirens, distant but unmistakable, sliced through the night. The neighbors exchanged glances. Some even pulled out their phones to record, the glow of their screens adding to the growing tension. Karen took one last wild look around, then bolted. She didn't get far. Todd didn't stop her. No one did. But she didn't make it past the front yard before two patrol cars screeched to a stop at the curb, red and blue lights flashing across the perfectly manicured lawns of the neighborhood she had ruled for years. Two officers stepped out, hands resting on their belt. Karen Simmons? One of them called out. Karen froze, her breath coming in short gasps. She turned, her desperate smile plastered back onto her face. Officers, this is all just a big miscommunication. One of the officers, a woman with sharp eyes, pulled out a notepad. We got multiple reports about a fraudulent charity operation happening here tonight. We need to ask you a few questions. Karen's voice wavered, but she fought to keep it steady. Of course. I'm happy to clear this up. She turned to me with a look that screamed help me, but I just stared back. The officer gestured toward the house. Let's step inside. Karen hesitated. Can we do this later? I mean, this is all so public. Public fraud, public questioning, the officer replied flatly. Step inside, ma'am. Karen had no choice but to follow. As she disappeared through the door with the officers, Todd let out a shaky breath, rubbing a hand over his face. The guests, sensing that the show was over, began murmuring amongst themselves. Some were already heading for their cars, while others lingered in small groups, whispering about how Karen had finally been taken down. I walked over to Harold, who was still clutching his phone. You get your money back? He shook his head. Still pending. I nodded. If it doesn't go through, file a fraud claim. This is going to court. Harold exhaled. What a night. I let out a low chuckle. You have no idea. It took another hour for everything to settle. Karen was taken in for questioning, and Todd, coward that he was, agreed to provide evidence against her in exchange for leniency. The donation box was seized as evidence. The gala, once a glamorous event meant to show off Karen's power, ended with empty tables, half-eaten food, and the distinct absence of its host. By the time I made it back inside, my backyard was almost empty. A few stragglers remained, whispering about Karen's downfall. Debbie, the HOA board member, caught my arm as I passed. "I don't think the HOA is going to survive this," she said. I shrugged. "Might be for the best." She nodded, then hesitated. "You know, Jake, you'd make a good HOA president." I snorted. "Absolutely not." She laughed. "Didn't think so." I finally made it to my back porch, grabbed a cold beer from the fridge, and sat down on the same chair I had been lounging in earlier that day, before all hell had broken loose. The night air was cool, quiet. For the first time in years, it felt like I actually had my backyard to myself. I took a long sip, leaned back, and smiled. Far in the distance, I could still hear Karen screaming from inside the police car. "Best damn gala I'd ever hosted."